coming down to this neighborhood is as iconic a thing in New York as you can do, all right? For a number of different reasons, which we're going to talk about today, all right?
In the shadow of New York Stock Exchange, a walking tour starts. A 2-hour stroll of sights and stories. But this isn't about the normal city stuff. There's no Statue of Liberty or Empire State Building on this route. This is all about money.
There's no more iconic business in New York than the business of finance.
John White's a former banker. He now tells tourists about how Wall Street imploded a decade ago.
This is the height of the housing boom. Shall we call it a bubble? Yes, we shall, all right? The height of the housing bubble. And then all of a sudden, what happens? It jags.
And how one name became synonymous with the global financial crisis. The name of a bank.
The collapse of Lehman Brothers was like a tremendous shock to the system. They've been in New York for a long, long time.
By 2008, Lehman's was America's fourth biggest investment bank, now resident in this building, which was to become sadly familiar as the backdrop to images like this.
Hey, give him some room. Just back up a little, please.
After a century and a half, Lehman's collapsed. It was, and is still, by far the biggest corporate bankruptcy in history.
Word spread very quickly, and there were people, as everyone has seen, people coming out of the building that night with boxes. And in the middle of the night, we got an email which said that the firm had filed for bankruptcy, but that you should continue to come to work unless your manager told you otherwise. So I didn't sleep very much that night.
Lynn Gray spent more than a decade at Lehman's. When her team lost their jobs, they came to this bar over the road to mark the moment when a famous, respected bank went bankrupt.
I never expected to leave. I expected to end my career at Lehman Brothers. We've had reunions every year here, and it's not that we're celebrating that we put something over on people or anything like that. We just like to be together.
Lehman's was brought down by debt and cash flow, punctured by the toxic effects of a collapse in the American housing market. And Lehman's wasn't alone. America had fallen for the idea that house prices would only ever go up, and finance companies rushed to offer mortgages to just about anyone. It was a bubble, and it burst. Lehman's collapsed, and the US government decided not to bail out the company or its staff. Well, there's no question that the global financial crisis had its roots in America's housing market, but not just in the prices that people paid. It was about what banks did with all that mortgage debt. They created a new financial product called a collateralized debt obligation, a CDO, a bundle of good and bad mortgages that were traded around. Here's how the process worked. At the top were the triple A's, the mortgages you could rely on, good borrowers. And then you get less and less reliable. This is still pretty okay, but then when you get down here, it's a bit more iffy. And these are the subprime borrowers, the people who borrowed more money than they could afford. And when the housing market started to go south, these ones may have been okay, but if you took out this level, the whole economy collapsed. Amidst the rubble, millions of American homes were repossessed. Unemployment doubled, and the US government, which had refused to bail out Lehman's, now found vast sums to prop up the rest of the financial sector.
This is a big package because it was a big problem. And you know, I will tell our citizens and continue to remind them that the risk of doing nothing far outweighs the risk of the package.
Lehman's executives became hate figures of the crisis. The bank's chief executive, Dick Fuld, has barely appeared in public since this bruising encounter at a congressional hearing.
Is that fair for the CEO of a company that's now bankrupt to have made that kind of money?
I believe the amount that I took out of the company over and above that was, I believe, a little bit less than $250 million. Still a large number, though.
His former colleagues all keep low profiles. But now I'm off to meet one of the people who led Lehman's. Tom Rousseau, the bank's chief legal officer. He was also its managing director.
Unless you get history straight and honest, you're never going to learn from it. And so from my point of view, I think history on Lehman in particular is just dead wrong.
He spoke exclusively to Sky News.
I remember that weekend, I was in the middle of it, and we sent over a document, I think it was on that Saturday, that went through all the things that would happen if Lehman were to go bankrupt. A detailed list. And I remember being on the phone with many people at the Fed, and then fundamentally we ran out of time.
A decade on, he's still angry, still convinced that the government's decision not to bail out Lehman's was the catalyst for the global crisis that followed.
The reason why Lehman was sacrificed was because there was a miscalculation on that weekend that if Lehman were let go, we could weather the storm. And I think Lehman was a victim because they saved everyone else. And, they could have just easily let Goldman or Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch, or they could let AIG, they could let a number of people fail. The political mood in the economy, in the country, was no more bailouts. So they really wanted to make an example. And so I think it was a bad judgment call, very bad judgment call. That signal was the signal that really put in jeopardy the financial world.
About an hour from Tom Rousseau's New Jersey home is the state's largest city, Newark, a proud old place with a vibrant young community, still feeling the impact of the global downturn. You've lived through a financial crisis. How nervous are you that another one could happen?
I'm always nervous because if you don't secure your financial future for yourself and you're working with someone, a financial crisis can always happen.
As being an entrepreneur, if you have a dream and you something you want to pursue, you don't let that financial crisis get in your way.
We're still recovering. People lost their homes. They're trying to build back their treasure trove of income and wealth.
Do you trust banks and bankers now?
No.
No, I don't.
No, because they've gotten a pass. They haven't given us any return on our money that we put into them in deposits, and they don't give us loans. So no, we don't trust them.
During the crisis, this state was third worst in America for home repossessions, known as foreclosures. Now it's moved up to first on that sorry list. And the very worst hit area is here, Essex County.
Hi, my name is Loretta Hill.
Loretta was a nursing assistant who was missold a mortgage that she couldn't possibly afford.
It was very hard, for a lot of times because we didn't have food, it was very hard, not knowing from day to day what's going to happen. They're going to foreclose. I'm getting these notices. We're foreclosing. I'm panicking. It's legal documents. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not understanding this. All I know is, damn, I paid for this house and now I'm going to lose it.
Walk around this bit of New Jersey and you see plenty of scars left over from the last financial crisis, whether it's repossessed homes or cratered property prices. And we know what happened in 2008. It was all a result of reckless lending to people who couldn't afford a mortgage. And the US government's done a lot to try to make sure that those circumstances don't happen again. But while regulators have concentrated on avoiding a repeat of the subprime crisis, is it possible that another storm has been brewing, this time based on the growing mountains of debt held by American companies and by the government? And there are people here convinced that that will be the catalyst for the world's next financial crisis. In fact, they fear it may already have begun. The crisis led to low interest rates and much more borrowing. US companies are now more than $6 trillion in debt. So should we worry that some companies won't cope with that debt burden? I'm heading back to Manhattan to talk to one of America's most respected banking analysts.
These companies now have borrowed pretty significantly, and so if they don't really have a viable business or their business is impacted by something in the economy or rates go up, their coverage, which is now quite good of their interest rate expense, could take a different turn. And that's the concern, is as rates move up, can these companies that have borrowed so much really have the wherewithal to pay back the debt that they took on?
Debt is everywhere in the States. The US government owes $21 trillion, more than the GDP of this, the richest and perhaps boldest country in the world.
Tremendous things for businesses. We get things done, creating millions of new jobs.
So this man is crucial. No, not President Trump, but the man with him, Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, the man who wants to push up America's interest rates. Economist Ann Pettifor predicted the financial crisis 2 years before the collapse of Lehman's. She now worries that rising rates in America will spark the next global crisis.
So timing is difficult, but I can say with some confidence that the rise in interest rates is going to be the trigger of the next crisis. And Mr. Powell has promised us that he was going to raise interest rates every month of this year into next year. So, you know, he's laying, in my view, he's laying the ground for the next crisis.
And how bad could it be?
Well, I think it'll be worse than the last crisis because we won't have the tools we had during the last crisis. It'll be really difficult to start pumping out quantitative easing, to start buying back all those assets. Already the new crisis has begun to roll.
We should heed those warnings. The financial crisis in 2008 shaped the modern world. It led to austerity, political division, perhaps to Brexit and the election of Donald Trump. Who knows what change the next one could bring?
I think the seeds of the next financial crisis are probably being watered right now.
Debt is what got everybody into trouble in 2008, and it could get everybody into trouble soon.
So you're going to have booms and busts, and something like what happened in 2008 is going to happen again. So keep your hat on and your seatbelt fastened.